Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar about fair trade towns and the fair trade movement in India. This is part of a multi-part series webinars. So today we're going to focus mainly on producer relationships and supply chains. And next one is going to be around education. After that, we'll have to figure out the exact sequence of events. It might be more about branding and retail, or it might focus more on some non-food crops like cotton, textiles, which happens to be my passion. My background is in fair trade and organic cotton textiles. That's how I got into fair trade about 20 years ago. We'll start with a little introduction about what is fair trade and what are these fair trade towns, and then I'll start to introduce our four speakers of the day.
I'd like to welcome everybody here to this Fair Trade Towns event. This is a very exciting new platform, and we really appreciate your interest and willingness to participate here. Fair trade is a movement of citizens, of farmers and agricultural workers, of businesses and other organizations and institutions who are committed to a more sustainable future. The commitment is to ensure that our food and agricultural systems are more sustainably practiced, to ensure that our farmers and workers get a more sustainable livelihood, and to ensure that the environment, which is critical to all of us, is also being cared for.
I am Johnny Joseph. I wish to talk a little about WFTO, World Fair Trade Organization. Through the initiative of a few organizations, it was an effort to bring together people and organizations who have been working to empower the marginalized through a medium called trade, and to bring together buyers and suppliers so that there is a coordinated effort around the world in order to mitigate the poverty that we see around, especially in the southern part of the world.
Fair Trade Towns is a movement where we see citizens coming together with businesses, coming together with education institutions, with local governments to celebrate sustainability and trying to incorporate more sustainable consumption practices across their local community.
If we see today globally, we have around 2022 fair trade towns. We have 39 countries, 6 continents, 14 capitals, 2 fair trade nations, and around 2,000 fair trade schools. The movement was brought into India in 2015, and Pushpanath Krishnamurthy offered to walk 450 kilometers from Pondicherry to Kotagiri, covering farmers, schools, businesses, and talking about the fair trade movement and increasing the awareness. Kotagiri, Ludhiana, Chennai, Pondicherry and Auroville, Goa are the few cities that have embraced this movement and are working together with steering committee members, with fair trade town supporters, and with the Friends of Fair Trade to take this movement forward in India.
Great. So as you already saw, this movement was sparked a lot in the south. There was this walk from Pondicherry to Kotagiri. Maybe it's not a coincidence that on this first webinar, a lot of our guests are from the south. So I will introduce them one by one, and then you will see a short video explaining where they come from. So the first to introduce is Mathew from Kotagiri, and I happened to see him a few days ago. I just happened to be in the Nilgiris.
Yeah.
We can, shall we have a look at your video, Mathew?
Yeah, great. What motivated us then is what motivates us even now, is to be able to work with communities who collect honey and who've done it over thousands of years. It works primarily with indigenous communities. It works primarily with communities that harvest produce from the forest. Their access to the market has been extremely limited, and for these communities to to be able to grapple and deal with those issues. Many times it's a struggle. And so large forest becomes an interface there where they have to link to the market and is able to bridge that gap. Whether being members or certified or not, as a matter of principle, we've stayed aligned to fair trade. Our producers, that they get the best prices, that they work in the best conditions. I think the concept of fair trade towns is a great idea. I think why it is important is also that normally fair trade becomes very reliant on its own set of supporters and customers, producers, and that link. But a fair trade town would be able to bypass that and to look at a larger civil society outside that exists and who is willing to if not buy into this concept, at least be ready to participate in this. So in that sense, I think the fair trade town is something that we need to take forward.
Super. Thanks, Mathew. We'll go into many of those topics that you briefly mentioned in the video. I'll just introduce the rest of the speakers. Next, Jacob Joes from across the mountains. Morning, Jacob. We also have a video about you. Let's have a look at that.
So at present, we are working with around 536 certified fair trade farmers and around 2,000 organic certified small and marginal farmers. That includes tribal, women and small and marginal farmers from the Western Ghat part of Idukki district. That is the premium amount we are giving to the spices farmers, organic farmers, is that we are rewarding their ecosystem services like carbon sequestration. They are helping the pollination and they are reducing the air and water pollution. They are increasing the nutrient cycles, etc. So we are rewarding the farmers by paying an additional premium, and we are purchasing these products from the farm gates so that they can save the transportation also, the amount of transportation. It should start from the farmers and it should go up to the consumers level. So there is the importance of this fair trade town movement. Basically, all the organization, they can come together and they can reach to the customers through this fair trade town movement. Also, they can proclaim the ideas of the fair trade movement through this type of fair trade town movements. So there is the importance of this fair trade town movement.
Thank you, Jacob. All right, swiftly moving on to our next speaker, Prashanth, back in the Nilgiris. And we also have, good morning, we also have a video about you. I'll let you talk in a minute, I'm just going to show these videos first.
We basically we are in the business of growing tea and manufacturing it. We're one of the earliest to get fair trade certified in India. So we've been certified fair trade for more than 20 years now. With this certification, there's something that comes back as a premium. Funds are used for various activities, like I can tell you that there's a scholarship that is ongoing. And then we've done various projects, like we've given tables and chairs to the local school. We've given these water purifiers to the local schools, the primary health centers. And with the fair trade premium funds, they've bought fridges, they've bought flasks, they've bought these containers to keep their food hot, because they carry food from home, they take it to the field, and it's a useful thing for the workers, because it's not just for their own benefit, but it's the community, the entire community that benefits from the. Why we went in for this fair trade certification is because the objectives of fair trade are aligned with the way the organization thinks and with our motive. We want to be a sustainable producer, do the best we can for the workers. That is the benefit from fair trade. It benefits the organization and benefits the people working here.
Thank you, Prashanth. All right, And then we have our last and final speaker, Devansh. Good morning, Devansh. Hey, we also have a video about you, so let's have a look at that.
When we were initially setting up, we wanted to see what is the direction in which we want to take the company. Now, cocoa in general is a commodity which is got a very dark history. So, there is child labor involved. Current day and age, there is deforestation which is happening. So, some of the things that, we really cared about, like, there is no child labor, there is no deforestation. We are paying a premium to the cocoa farmer for the beans that we are purchasing. Fair Trade India was, the option that we thought would best be able to facilitate that, because it's done in a very transparent fashion. I think we've done several workshops with Fair Trade Twin Towns. We've shared it with Grindale Pondicherry, very huge supporter of fair trade products. If there is a cake or a cookie or a brownie which is made of fair trade cocoa, this is the only way of spreading awareness is to be informing people. Webinars like this is a great platform to kind of tell people or inform people what fair trade is. So I think it is a collective and a holistic effort. It cannot be done by just one person or one company. It has to be a collective effort to get this done. If you take care of your supply chain, in the long run, the supply chain will take care of you. It will give much fruitful results. The only way you can grow is by giving back, and I think it was very important for us to do that, and fair trade does it in a very transparent fashion. So I'm glad that we are a part of it.
Super. All right. So welcome everybody. And this was a very multimedia introduction. My idea for this, we have about 1 hour together. One idea was to ask each of you, give each of you a couple of minutes to explain like how you got involved, what drew you to this fair trade movement. We have a diversity. Some people are working with independent small producers. We have some hired labor situations of production. We have some WFTO, some FLO. It's interesting mix. I don't know. Anybody can start. Anybody wants to start? Like, what drew you to fair trade, and what got you excited to be part of this movement?
Can I start?
Go for it.
Yeah. Okay. So, when you ask this question, sort of many thoughts running through my head. But I think what's very important is not to look at just fair trade in isolation. We have the organic world too, and I think it's that they complement each other, and that for me is not only very interesting, but that's what draws me to this ecosystem of organic and fair trade. They are overlapping in many senses, but I think the other is not complete without both of them being in play. And I think that's very important, because fair trade looks at certain aspects, organic looks at certain aspects, and I think we should be able to merge or fuse the two to be able to take these movements forward. Also very important, I think, is to be able to recognize that we have one planet and we have people. And how do we ensure that we continue to play the role of stewards of this planet? And if we do that, we are then not looking just at a supply chain, but we're looking at a sustainable. We use the word sustainable many times. We're looking at a sustainable value chain all the way to the customer, and which then has to draw in the customer too. And I think that customer engagement with fair trade, I think, is a very important part of it, because you are then able to provide a strong guarantee to the customer that there has been a process that has been put in place, and leave aside the process, but there's also a certain principle or a value system that becomes embedded in your culture. I think these are some facets which draw me very importantly to fair trade.
Super. Thank you very much.
I'd like to add to what Mathew has said.
Please.
I agree with what he says, that organic and fair trade are a very good fit. That is one of the reasons why my organization decided to go in for fair trade. Social values are at the core of our business model. So being organic and a sustainable producer, fair trade adds a socially responsible label to your product. So it's there's a lot of synergy going in being organic and fair trade certified. Another good thing about fair trade, which unlike any other certification, you have a whole lot of other certifications, but the differentiating factor here is that something comes back as a premium. There's a premium which is paid back to the producer for every kilo of the product that's sold, whether it's tea or spice or honey or whatever. So this premium is very useful in improving the lives of the people who are actually produce this product. So that is a very unique differentiator of the fair trade label, where something comes back to the producer.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm also complimenting what Mr. Mathew and Mr. Prashanth have said. We are also an organization. We are promoting the organic movement from early 90s onwards. So the sustainability, what we can see as a holistic approach. Basically, our organization is located on the Western Ghat part of the Idukki district in the Kerala state. And when the Western Ghat farming system is considered, there were two major challenges we faced in the initial stages of our operation. That is ecological sustainability of the agro ecosystem of the region and the economic sustainability of the small farmers. As we know, the Western Ghat is one of the world's biodiversity hotspot and has a fragile ecosystem. The issues of the climate change like droughts, flood, landslide, soil erosion, and associated diseases to the plants has adversely impacted the ecology of the region and livelihood of the farmers. The second thing is that we know the prices of the spices are highly fluctuating. So most of the time, the livelihood of the farmers, there's a high level of uncertainty in the livelihood of the small farmers in the region. So there is the importance of the fair trade system. It brings not only the economic sustainability, but to the environmental sustainability to the region where it operates. So this draws us to the system of fair trade.
Okay. Can you? I'm just curious. Can you say a bit more about if there is a link between improving the stability or the certainty of the producer and this ecological managing the ecological sensitivity you spoke about?
Is a question to me?
Yes, yeah, because you were just saying that there are these two aspects in the Western Ghats. That one, you've got a very sensitive ecosystem, and then on the other hand, you have a very volatile market. So, how are they related?
It's like the climate change has a severe impact on the livelihood of the farmers, because as we know, in the 2018 flood, this was the area which was highly affected. One of the area which was highly affected. So like the flood and the subsequent drought and soil erosion and the diseases to the spices plant, this all will be like affecting the livelihood of the farmers by reducing the crop yield and maybe sometimes completely destroying their plants. So this makes the life of the small farmers in a dilemma. So the practices like the organic practices like soil conservation practices and water harvesting systems and the use of bio fertilizers and bio pesticides, etc. This all brings sustainability in the ecosystem, and this all and that ecological sustainability will leads to the economic sustainability to the farmers. And also, as I already said, the prices are highly fluctuating. So through this fair trade movement, we can ensure a benchmark price or a minimum price to the small farmers throughout the year, so that they can plan their livelihood or their future activities accordingly.
Okay. Maybe we'll get back to that. I also briefly want to hear from Devansh. Devansh, what brought you into this movement? What got you excited about it?
So, in 2015, when we were starting to make chocolate, we definitely noticed some similarities. What Mr. Mathew said, that, USD organic, or, just organic farming has too many overlaps with fair trade. And, the more I researched, we learned that, fair trade is a company that works in a very transparent fashion. There is a premium that you pay for the crop, especially a commodity like cocoa, where there is child labor used, there's deforestation, there are all sorts of climate issues because of the deforestation. And the more we learned about fair trade, we also learned that there is a cocoa supply chain in Idukki. Plantrich is a company that supplies or makes cocoa for a Swiss company. So, more than 80 or 90% of them were women, the farmers working in the field. So, for us, it was pretty much a no-brainer. It was a combination of these things that kind of drove us to fair trade.
Okay, and where are you sourcing your cocoa?
Our beans right now are from Idukki region and also the Malabar region.
Okay. So we are truly a southern gathering right now.
100% Kerala product.
Okay, so maybe that's a segue to the next question. I wanted to understand a bit about what happened in the last 20 odd years to this fair trade movement. How have you seen the changes in this movement in India? Is it catching on? Is it staying in a small niche for like a limited number of elite urban buyers? What have been your observations about that?
I think for me, when we started off in 2016, I've been certified since 2016. It was still a fairly new movement. Like you mentioned, it came to India in 2015 only. So it was fairly new. There were very few people at the time in 2016 who understood what fair trade was. So, I also had the core business to inform people what my business was. We were not just any chocolate maker, we were a bean to bar chocolate maker. So we are going from a cocoa bean all the way to a finished product. So we had to inform people what bean to bar was, and in addition to that, we also had to inform what fair trade and what organic is at the same time. So disseminating all this information through social media or through exhibitions was quite a task. But I think from 2019, we've started to see people recognize the fair trade logo, right? They may not know exactly if this is fair trade because fair trade is written in small words, but they recognize the logo and they know that this means sustainably sourced ingredients, right? So they recognize that. And I think I've been seeing that more in larger cities than not in towns, but cities like Mumbai, Delhi, Kolkata, Chennai, Bangalore, people recognize that mark. So I think it is a movement which is catching up, and it is only a matter of time before it becomes pretty much known everywhere. So I'm very happy with the movement where it's going at the moment.
Yeah, as Mr.
Thanks.
Devansh.
Prashanth, go for it.
Okay.
Fair trade is today, I think, the world's most recognized ethical label that connects producers, consumers, and and businesses. Um, in India, the awareness is just it's not really to the level that it is abroad. But I think this is the right time to develop awareness among Indian consumers uh, to make informed consumption choices. Uh, I think tea and coffee, cocoa, spices, cotton textiles, and garments are the main products in India that are fair trade certified. The fair trade towns movement, I think, takes this concept a little further by creating awareness, mostly in and it's a good thing that it's in places like Pondicherry, the Nilgiris, Goa, and all that, where you have a lot of tourists coming in. So if they get to learn about it, they go back to their own hometowns and they spread the word around there. That's how I think the movement is going to grow, and that is how people are going to become aware about fair trade in India.
Okay. Yeah, Jacob.
Okay. So, So, as Mr. Devansh rightly pointed out, we are the first, our retail brand True Bio is the first certified organic spices brand in the fair trade segment in India. So, we started around 7 years back, this brand. So, at that time, it was very difficult to communicate what fair trade is to the consumers. But now, what we are facing is that it's very easy to communicate the philosophy of the fair trade to the consumers. And also, at that time, around 6 or 7 years back, there were hardly, I think, 10 or less than 10 brands under the fair trade certified label. But now there are a lot of brands, including this clothing brand, and a lot of other brands are coming up in the fair trade logo. So there is a synergy is being created in this segment. So it is very easy for us to communicate the philosophy to the consumers and to make them aware about the what fair trade is and what the fair trade means to the producers.
All right. So, Mathew, you didn't raise your hand, but you get.
I'm not raised my hand, but you see, I want to differentiate a little bit between fair trade as the logo that is being talked about, and fair trade as the principle. So the logo is up behind Prashanth's desk, and that's the logo that Devansh, Prashanth, and Jacob talked about. But fair trade as a philosophy, I think, has more to it than the certification process. And I think that's important for us to remember and constantly take that forward. So yes, through the certification process, it becomes easier to be able to communicate that to the customer. But I think that there is a huge market beyond the business part of it. How do we take this concept out, and especially to the younger generation, which are looking for value-driven brands who are going beyond just a business and a profit motive. And I think so the effort to reach out to schools, colleges, towns, I think these are all very important parts of that. The other part of it, talking about fair trade, is that what I have seen is over the past few decades, fair trade. I'm not talking about the logo fair trade and the organization fair trade. Fair trade as a movement has always been driven by a market that is overseas. And so what Prashanth was talking about, whether it is tea, coffee, bananas, and you go out to Latin America, so it's very commodity driven. Spices, they are very commodity driven. And I think what we have, so by that process, what we've done is we've left out a huge chunk of other players. And I think there are movements in the fair trade. There are organizations. So I'm part of the World Fair Trade Organization. Yeah, and so that's much more highly garments, handicrafts, and all of that driven. And I think we need to be able to find and create markets for a much larger set of products, which then become part of the customers, whether it's part of their food basket or whether it's part of their non-food basket. So it is also being very responsible about the clothes you wear, about the waste you generate. All of this needs to become part of our ethos as people and as the movement. And I see in India, yes, it's been there, but I think there is so much more potential to grow. Organic has created a space for itself. Yes. So and it's also governed by laws, internationally and within the country. So there's a legality involved in it. Fair trade still doesn't have that. And so it's organic. It's nice in one way, but what it has done is it has tied itself up hand and feet, because you then have to become very defined by that process to be able to carry. And so certified organic has become the word rather than organic being important. And I think it's very important to define, to differentiate that. Same thing for fair trade. Let's not make certified fair trade the end point. Let's make fair trade the larger worldview that we need to be involved with.
I sense again a beautiful segue to the next area where I wanted to talk about challenges, because on the one hand I hear Devansh is saying that I want a transparent, easy to communicate tool that will build consumer confidence, and on the other hand I hear Mathew saying that certification is nice, but it should be about dialogue and conversation, and it should be contextual and local. So maybe we can go a little bit into those tensions in the movement and the challenges there. Who wants to speak to those?
I don't think it's tension, but I think it's about creating a larger worldview. I think that so there are different ways. Fair Trade International has approached it. There is a different way where WFTO has approached it, and I think there is space for both these movements to grow. And I think it's important that fair trade grows rather than a particular label that grows. And I think the challenge. So let me now come back to the domestic market. I think you see in Europe, particularly UK, the fair trade label is an extremely recognized, logo, and people look for that and are very specific about that. In our own country, we people, if you talk about fair trade, most probably they will get into trade fairs. They start talking about trade fairs. Well, that's the limited understanding, even when you engage with the state. Yeah. So I think it's important for us to constantly talk about fair trade in our own domestic market, to be able to build that. I think what Devansh was saying, that he's seen that in larger, bigger cities. I think very important to keep pushing that. Maybe it's also very important in our own local spaces where we are, to be able to talk about it and to be able to push it. I think it's important for people to know that there is a fair trade movement which brings a certain process into place, but is much larger than just the brand or the logo.
Anybody else wants to speak to the challenges, or has it all been smooth sailing and fair trade is going to take over the world in a few years?
As Mr. Mathew rightly pointed out, the system or the marketing system or the awareness creation system in the fair trade in India, it should be like a pull approach, a pull from top. a pull from market is needed. Suppose a producer is producing some product in a fair trade way, and there is nobody, no consumer wants this product. Then what's the meaning of producing this? So the awareness creation should start from the top level. When the consumer should feel that when I am paying an additional money for this particular product, what is the effect or what is the impact that money is being created? Also, he should be aware or he should be bothered that when I am buying something from you or from a producer, I am partially responsible for how it made. So he also should be aware about the social cost involved in the production of that particular commodity, and he should be willing to pay for that social cost rather than putting that cost upon the society. So this level of creation should be, this level of awareness should be created on the market. This can be do like with the support of all the business or like NGOs and the fair trade town movements and the national and international fair trade organizations.
Okay. Big job for you, Devansh, to educate everybody through chocolate.
Yes, I think one of the main challenges was just educating people what fair trade is. I think for us it was more about communication of what the concept is and how does that fit into the bar of chocolate that they consuming. I think when I've done visits to Kerala at the farm level, people know what fair trade is, right? I mean, the farmers had once asked me, why don't you share some of your chocolate? And I pulled out a bar of chocolate which I was carrying in my backpack, and the first thing that they saw was, oh, it's fair trade. So I think they at farm level, people in at least in Kerala are pretty aware of what it is. But on the consumer side of things, like Mathew pointed out, it has to definitely be a pull approach would be most ideal. But I think you also have to apply a little bit of a push approach to tell people what it is. When it's not widely known. So I think just the communication of what sustainability is, communication of what organic is, communication of what bean to bar chocolate is. I think it's more got to do with communication for me as a brand and me as an individual to the end consumer. So unless I could do an exhibition, I could sell chocolate to people and not tell them what fair trade or organic or what bean to bar chocolate is, and they would go about their own way. But if I'm doing a chocolate tasting, I sell the bar of chocolate to them. I tell them the story behind bean to bar. I tell them the story of sustainability. I tell them the story of fair trade. It is very likely that over the weekend when they interact with their friends, they will likely talk about it. So most definitely communication is a big challenge for me at the moment.
Okay, yeah, when Jacob was talking about that consumers should take responsibility, they should be aware that when I make this purchase, there's so many knock-on effects. What came to mind for me is that we've been like de-educating consumers over the last couple of decades, and so yeah, I wonder how that's going to happen. Maybe Prashanth, you want to speak to that? How are we going to reconnect humans with what they consume?
Yes, I think when it comes to consumer preferences, many consumers would want to buy a socially responsible and ethical product. It's because of lack of awareness and lack of choices that they're not able to right now here. So that is where I think the fair trade towns movement comes in, where to build awareness, and the consumer should get to know that there is something like this happening here, and there is a product available. And the more and more it gets onto the shelves, the more choice the consumers will have. Another challenge I'd like to say is on the panel, I think I'm the only one who's a producer, who's actually producing. The others are mostly to aggregating or marketing the product. So from the producer's perspective, I'd like to say that climate change and global warming have turned the weather patterns topsy-turvy. Previous weather patterns are there's no correlation with what you can expect and what has happened in the past. So it throws up a lot of challenges in the agriculture sector. I think this whole thing about climate change and global warming, agriculture has been affected the most. You cannot plan your production. You don't know what the weather is going to be like. The extremes of too much of rain or prolonged droughts or all that is happening. So it's a global issue, and it's not something that we can do much about. But in our own small way, I think as producers and as consumers, we can contribute. As producers, by trying to be follow sustainable practices, produce in a sustainable way with as less harm to the environment as possible, is what we can do from our side. And as consumers, they should also have the awareness and look for a product that is both socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable. And for this, awareness is the only thing that can bring all this into place. And this is where the fair trade town movement should grow, should go to more cities, more towns, more districts, more states, and get more people involved in this fair trade movement.
I see a couple of interesting questions coming up in the comment section. For example, Murli has asked interesting question about what % of a consumer price should ideally go to the producer. Does anybody have an answer to this? Very specific question.
Yeah. I think this is a very open-ended question, because most people say at least 50% should go back to the producer. But but if there's an entire processing that takes place, means again I just take an example of Devansh. Is he's producing the chocolate, and so there is an entire cost to that value addition that takes place. So that there has to be separated out. So I think one is to be able to maybe a couple of things is to be able to benchmark it to the prices outside available, and to be able to put a premium above that. So that would be one way of doing it, because you can't sort of price yourself out of the market also, so there may be in a scenario where there has not been this process has not been in place, you may have suddenly doubled the price. Yes, so that's maybe you pushed your way into and created a fair trade process there. But at other points, you also must realize that there is a whole chain along once you start selling, and there are distributors, there are retailers, and all of them have a certain cost to that. And so to price it as a percentage of the product sometimes may be a very easy answer out.
Thanks. Anybody else wants to speak to that?
I have a view on that. Yeah, I have a view on that. Yeah, it's like as Mr. Mathew said, it depends on commodity to commodity. As we are doing the spices like pepper, ginger, turmeric, etc. So we have to definitely consider the externalities or the true cost associated with each stage of the production, of the value chain. There is the production stage, processing stage, transportation, and the supply system, and when it's reached up to the consumer level. So we have to consider what are the externalities, like negative externalities, and we have to consider the positive externalities during the production stage. Since the question is about the producer, so there should be a system to monitor and exactly calculate the externalities related to the production and we have to set the price accordingly in order to make the system a truly fair trade one. Otherwise, what will happen is that the consumer will pay only for the commodity, and the social cost will be put in the head of the producer or to the society.
Yeah, and also in your introduction video, Jacob, you mentioned about ecosystem services that that would be an example of a positive externality.
Yes, definitely.
I was wondering, how do you keep track of those? It sounds like a complicated job.
Yes, it's very complicated job. The major challenge we are facing is that there is no scale or benchmark to measure all this. But even then, we have a separate farm extension team to monitor all this. Like we have a pilot project to calculate the carbon sequestration from each of the farms, how many liters of water are being used for each of the crops. It's like a water budgeting system, and we are monitoring the biodiversity, like interspecies and interspecies biodiversity in each of the farm, including the soil microbial biodiversity in the farm, and we are calculating all this, and it's like a pilot project. But there should be some system or some benchmark to make it all this actually happen throughout the region or the fair trade farms.
Okay, looking forward to that. That sounds like another whole webinar that we can focus on those methodologies. So we're nearing the last bit of our webinar. I just wanted to end this conversation on like a tangible story note. Are there like real life experiences that you can share from your engagement, with fair trade? Something that Devansh.
Right. So I think one of the impacts that fair trade has had on me, and we've had with fair trade, and the collaborative effort that we've done was with a farming group called FTAK and their trading partner called Elements. Now, since 2015 or since 2016, since we are with fair trade, we've been sourcing our cacao from Plant Rich, which is based in Idukki. Now, in 2018, like Jacob had pointed out, there was a massive flood, and there were issues with the supply chain. In the sense, acres and acres of land were wiped out, and we were put in a position where there was no supply of cocoa, or at least fair trade cocoa at the time. So, we were looking to push Mr. Abhishek from fair trade to see if there is a farming group that is a part of fair trade, and they are kind of inclined to take up the fermentation and drying bit, and I would be happy to help them out. So I think Mr. Tommy from FTAK was very helpful with this. So he has a collection of farmers where they grow cacao, known as an intercrop between two coconut trees. So cacao is there. They sell it to the collection centers locally, but they don't get a fair price for it. And he was willing to kind of take this forward, wherein I was there for about a week. We did a little bit of training. We showed them what fermentation and drying is, and after a few trial batches that we did, we kind of figured out and tweaked the process to a point where it matched our quality standards. So now we are sourcing from Idukki, and we are sourcing from FTAK. So I'm very happy that here is a supply chain which is pretty much sprung up from nowhere, and we are impacting the livelihood of the farmers in that particular region. So I'm very proud of this particular thing that we've done, and this is something that I thought I'll share with you.
I also saw on the comment somebody was asking about, can you explain the concept of bean to bar?
Yes.
What is bean to bar?
So bean to bar is you take cocoa beans, which the farmer grows, and he would then ferment and dry those beans. You would take those beans, you would process it in your processing unit or a factory of sorts, and then turn it into a finished bar of chocolate. So you would roast the beans, you would crack them open, you would winnow it, you would grind it, you would conch it, you would temper the chocolate, and then you would package it and then ship it out to a consumer. So all of this process is done under one roof, and that's what bean to bar chocolate is. So we are a little different from what larger companies like Lindt and Godiva do in Europe. They alkalize their cocoa because they want consistency. We do not alkalize the cocoa. We want the fruitiness of the cacao to show from a region. So, cocoa from Idukki is going to taste different from Malabar Hills, is going to taste different from Polachi in Tamil Nadu, is going to taste different from Andhra Pradesh or Karnataka for that matter. So we're trying to highlight the cocoa characteristics, and that's what bean to bar chocolate is. It's made in small batches, but it's working closely with the farmers to make really good quality chocolate.
Okay, sounds a bit like specialty coffee. Like
Specialty
single
coffee,
origin.
yeah. You can compare it to craft beer. You can compare it to like a single malt Scotch whiskey, something very similar to that. So, yeah.
Super. Thank you very much. Mathew, Prashanth, Jacob, you have any impactful stories to tell? Mathew.
So I would like to relate a story from last year when the pandemic struck. Yeah. And for us, the season, the tourist season in the hills is from April to mid-June. And you sort of prepare for that because we run a few of our own stores here in the local towns, and you prepare for that. And then when the pandemic struck, overnight means 40% of our annual revenue went out of the window. And at that point, whom do you sell to? So even for a product like honey, I mean, you are in a state of entire lockdown, the country's in a lockdown, and what do you do? And we were like struggling, what do we do at this point? And I think at that point, the World Fair Trade Organization, WFTO Asia, the regional chapter, they just conducted a webinar and just trying to bring producers groups together and sort of brainstorm as to what do we do now, because it's not only just a particular region, but it's all of us are suffering. And that's when somebody talked about face masks. And it was like, out of the blue, face mask. And initially, my reaction was like, okay, I have no clue about this. This is not my area of work. And what am I supposed to do? And then they said, we'll hold a webinar for all those who are interested, And I was like, hello, where is this leading to? And so we had a discussion internally, and we were just tying up with a small group who were producing cloth bags. And I just reached out to them. I said, would you like to attend this? Because as a partner of Last Forest, you can jump in and be there. And you will not believe it, overnight, these people, they were struggling too, because, there was nobody to buy their bags and quilts that they were producing. And suddenly they were producing masks and we were selling them. And I think the most moving moment at that point was when those women received wages. They said they were crying at that time because people around them had been thrown out of jobs. There was no money. And these were women here who had suddenly become the centers of their households, They were bringing in money and they were working. And I think that for me was a representation of what fair trade meant at that point, because there was no need for for a regional chapter to come together and try and find a solution. And somebody was good enough to let go of what they knew. They were ready to teach others, and I think that was the concept of fair trade, which for me had value, and it went beyond just a business proposition.
Yeah, interesting. In Spanish also they talk about the economía solidaria, no? It's like the solidarity, using the market for solidarity. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Prashanth, story to tell.
Yeah, I think the fair trade premium is what really makes the difference. I can see in the comments, somebody wanted to know how does one's organization get the fair trade premium. Rati Joshi is the person. So is there a criteria to be eligible for it? The first step for that is to get certified fair trade and sell your product as a fair trade product. That is when the premium trickles back into the system, and that is what makes a difference. I'll elaborate more on it. There's another person in the comment, Ahmed AK, who wants to know how much of the community has grown in terms of percentage. I don't know if it can be quantified, but what I can tell you is that the premiums really make a difference on the ground. People benefit from the premiums. The premium comes in for every kilo of tea that we sell. There's a fair trade premium committee that decides how the premiums are spent. It's a committee formed by the workers who take decisions on how to spend that money which has come in as premium. So they've made education a priority. Every student on the estate gets a scholarship for their higher education. There is, there's a school on the estate where the primary education is taken care of. But when they go in for their higher education, that is when the scholarships are useful for them. It reduces the financial burden on the parent. The other thing is we've created something called a death fund, because when there's a death in the family, when there's the cost of the funeral, the various other things that happens. So an amount from this death fund is given to the family when they have a setback like this, and this goes a long way in helping them out. Then the other thing is we've given kitchen equipment like fridges, pressure cookers, mixers, thermos flasks, then those hot cases to carry food in. All these help the women more than anyone else, because they are the people who come out and work in the fields, and then they go back home and they have to take care of the family, cook food for them and all that. So these things go a long way in helping them. So and also the fair trade premium funds help the community also. We've the premium committee has decided to give desks and chairs to the school. They've given them water purifiers to the schools, to the primary health centers around here. So it's not just the workers on the estate who benefit, but it's the entire community that benefits in some way or the other. That's how the premium trickles down, and that is where the benefit on the ground is.
I actually had a follow-up question about that, because I was looking at your video with the tiffin boxes, and then I was thinking that isn't that the employer's responsibility to make sure that the workers have these kind of working conditions? So where do you see that the responsibility of the worker begins and the employer ends?
Right. So what I'd like to clarify and make very clear here is the employer's responsibility is something else. The premium is not used for any of the employer's responsibilities. What the employers is supposed to pay the wage and provide proper living conditions. All that is taken care of from the employer's side. It is something extra over and above what the employer does. That is what the premium is used for.
And another question that comes up, so once you have a group of workers that have a pot of money to decide about, and they get used to having meetings and listing their needs and setting their priorities, do you see like any knock-on effects? Like, are they getting more organized in other spheres of life as well? Or is it just limited to this, there's a few lakhs coming in, and where do we allocate that? And
I
you,
think,
Prashanth, yeah, go for it.
Yeah. I think they become more involved with the business when they are also part of the decision making process. Over here, when you have a committee that so they are also interested in more improving the fair trade sales, improving more fair trade sales, because it equals more fair trade sale equals to more fair trade premium, and they get more money to spend on to try and improve their lives. So it's a win-win situation for everyone. For the organization, it helps improve your sales. For the people who are actually working there, because the premium comes back, and then it's useful for them, and for the consumer also, because the consumer is satisfied that he's buying a ethical product.
Okay. Jacob, you have any field story to share with us?
Yes. For that, when we are speaking about the premium spending, since we are an SPO category, our producer organization, Sahyadri Organic Small Farmers Consortium, falls into the small producer organization category. The premium spending method is a bit different from what Mr. Prashanth has explained. We don't have any premium committee, but the premium decisions is being taken in the General Assembly of the SPO. That will usually hold in every year in the month of August. And we have an elected executive committee of 9 members, including president, secretary, and other office bearers. So in the General Assembly of the SPO, all the members, they are discussing about the premium use for the next 1 year. And they are making a plan, a budget, fair trade development plan for the next 1 year. And the executive committee is executing that plan. What we did is that we are supplying good quality organic inputs to the farmers, and we are supplying planting materials, spices planting materials to the farmers, and we are arranging a lot of trainings related to the soil and water conservation and like that things, climate change, and how to tackle with the climate change, etc. So our awareness programs in the field level. Also, we are doing soil and water conservation activities in the field level. These are the activities we are doing in relation to the premium spending thing. And when we are coming to the impact stories, I wanted to talk about the vetiver basket making group, the women vetiver basket making group of the PDS group operating under the PDS organic spices. We are actually promoting the use of vetiver grass, which is a native to the Western Ghats, to address a soil erosion problem in the hilly areas of this region. We know the vetiver grass, due to its very deep and fibrous root system, it has a capacity to provide a natural means of the soil conservation. The grass has a capacity to slow down the runoff, the water runoff. It has a capacity to tap sediments and filter out the nutrients and retain the soil. So we are encouraging our farmers to plant vetiver grass along the contours within their farms. The root of the vetiver is also using in the Ayurvedic and cosmetic industry for the medicinal and flavoring and aromatic purpose. And for the leaf, there were actually the leaves were profusely grown but left underutilized. There were no particular use for the leaves. In the year 2011, we have trained a group of 10 ladies in the region to weave the vetiver basket out of these leaves to provide an additional income through their additional income than their normal farming activity. So at first we trained 10 ladies, and they have trained 50 more ladies And the basket is actually using as a gift box to market the fair trade spices cultivated by the fair trade farmers. And now it's a micro enterprise for this ladies group, and they are making additional income than their normal farming activities. So this is actually an example of PDS Organic Spices objective to enable to ensure the sustainability of the ecosystem by transforming the actions toward the conservation to economic activity. We call this method as the eco-economization. So the ecological activity is converted to an economical activity through the woman entrepreneurship. So the idea of the fair trade is also highly involved in this. So in this type of holistic approach, we can ensure the sustainability of the activities.
Thank you. Interesting. I saw this question coming in about from Tarun about how do individual farmers get access to this market? You know, you need to be a big organization in order to reach these markets. Anybody wants to speak to that? I guess a related question that comes up to me is that are there enough organized farmers in India for small-scale farmers to really be able to access this kind of market?
Yeah, an individual farmer cannot. It's difficult, but what they can do is form a small producer organization. So then they have a larger base to work with. The volumes are there then.
Yes, I agree with Prashanth. I think that's the way to go, because individually to be able to put in place the process as well as to be able to supply quantities may not be possible. And I think that's where the groups coming together to form an FPO or to small organization, I think that is able to address that. You will never, you may not get into thousands of tons of pepper or something like that, but if you can still work in hundreds of tons of pepper. We've seen that when groups of people have come together. So I think the solution is there. You may have to grow maybe 40 years down the line, you may see thousands of tons of pepper. Yeah. But I think if you keep that long-term perspective and you remain rooted to your principles and ethics, I think it's possible.
Is this something that we're seeing in India? I mean, are farmers getting together and organizing themselves?
Yes, it is. I see a lot happening, especially in the organic side. I'm seeing a lot of farmer producer organizations coming together and being able to take on the market and successfully. They're doing it on a scale which and they're building brands around it also. I think that's the success. If as a brand itself, and you don't just become part of a supplier to a larger aggregator. You see, you move away from that. And you become your own, build your own brand as an institution, as a supplier. I think that's the final point for these small groups of farmers.
Yeah. Whenever you hear people talking about the agricultural crisis, there's always like, let's cut out the middleman, no? But I understand what you're saying is that let's become the middleman.
Yeah, it's not so easy to be able to say just let's cut out the middleman. I think middlemen play roles. If you are able to combine those roles as part of your own institution, fabulous. You are then spreading the value within your own network and not having other people do that. So yes, I think those roles have to be played. Who plays that role is something that you have to deal with.
And also, there lies the importance of the certification. There is a fair trade certification. The fair trade certification, as we all know, there are checks and balances to ensure that the benefits are actually reaching to the real farmers. That's the premium is being paid or the minimum price is being paid. Oh, there are systems, audits, and checks to monitor all these activities.
Hmm. 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 Is there something like, I know, for example, Mathew, you've been working with alternatives to the organic certification system where you don't necessarily have like an inspector flying in and you have more participatory peer-to-peer quality assurance. Is there something like that also possible in the fair trade movement?
So I think so in the WFTO system, which is the World Fair Trade Organization, so you have a 3-level process. So the first one is you do a self-assessment. So each of the fair trade principles, the 10 fair trade principles, are broken down in detail, and you have to be able to assess yourself, which I think is fabulous because it forces you to think about each one of them. And so there's not a ready-made template where you're checking off boxes and saying yes and no. So you have to provide answers as to what you have done. That takes time. It's not just you sit on a desk and you are able to, just fill out that template. The second part of that is once you fill that self-assessment, you are reviewed by a peer organization. So we have 40 odd WFTO guaranteed organizations in India. Any one of them can come and spend a couple of days with you and see what you have written. Now that peer review is not to be finding fault with you, but to be able to tell you, okay, this answer you have written or this response you have made, show me how have you gone about it. Or they may feel that there is a gap in that response. Then that allows you to build further. And then at the third level, we have an external reviewer, the third-party auditor. So it's not purely a peer review system, but in the process there is a part played by a peer group, which I think is very important because it also allows that peer reviewer to learn from you and go back also. It's not a one-way traffic, that they come in and they have given you inputs. They might be able to learn something from your producer groups, from your processes, from your system, and take that back. And I think that's important.
Super. Thank you so much. I'm looking at the time and I see we've got like 2 minutes left. Maybe as a last, to end on like a visionary note, each of you, can you, in one sentence, say what would you love to see happening in the fair trade movement in India in the next year?
I would love it if the state takes up promotion of fair trade at local levels. Forget about, that can aggregate and become a national movement. But if at local levels, fair trade becomes an integral part of whether it is maybe municipalities, corporations, and we look at making parts of their process a fair trade. So fair trade towns is a very important concept there, and whether that that merges and becomes. And so at a local level, if promotion of fair trade happens, it would be fantastic.
Super. Thank you. Devansh?
Yeah, I think what Mathew said is absolutely important, where I think, if local bodies, local at district level or at state level, if, they can make a more conscious effort to go fair trade and push the movement in that particular fashion, I think it will have a great impact. Also, if there are any tax benefits that can be passed on to either a processor or at the farmer level, I think that would also help in terms of getting the word of mouth out there. So, I think I think Mr. Mathew touched on this briefly, that organic has a legal, it is regulated, it has a legal structure, and if something like that can be done, where it is a part of the government institution, nothing like it. Absolutely.
Thank you. Prashanth.
Yeah. There are more and more producers getting fair trade certified, but only a part of their production is actually sold as fair trade. Ideal situation would be to sell the entire production as fair trade. Right now, it's only a part of a production that is being sold as fair trade, and most of it is for export. There's a very small market for fair trade products in India. So the need of the hour is to create awareness here, and especially in the cities where I think the time is right now to create awareness. People are becoming conscious about these things. So whether it is from the government side or from the first step here is to create awareness where people should at least know that there is a choice to buy a product that is sustainable and ethically produced.
Super, thank you. Let's spread this YouTube video far and wide so everybody gets to hear about it.
The last
Jacob.
word. Yeah. So it's often saying that we cannot create islands of sustainability. So as Mr. Mathew said, from the policy level, the government organization, and from the private level, the corporate companies can join hands together like a public-private partnership to promote the fair trade in India, the fair trade movement, and the small producer organizations in India.
Super. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Mathew. Thank you, Prashanth. Thank you, Devansh. Thank you, Fair Trade Towns India. So stay tuned on this YouTube channel and share this link so that next time we have many more participants and a bigger audience. And look forward to seeing you again on the next webinar, which is going to be about exactly what you spoke about, awareness raising and education. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.